You're listening to The Edge 105.1. Good afternoon to you and yours. Well, we're now inside the legal landscape. Statistics indicate that approximately 10% of Jamaicans are disabled, and an estimate of 82% of them live below the poverty line. The Disabilities Act is therefore very relevant for persons with disabilities as it aims to provide them with equal rights and protect them from discrimination. And even though the Act was passed by Parliament in 2014, it is only recently that it came into effect, on February 14, 2022. This delay was due to time spent setting up regulations, a council for persons with disabilities, and a confidential register to help the law function as it should. In this episode, we will hear from Associate Attorney at DunnCox, Miss Chantal Bennett, who will help us understand the changes introduced by this new law. Chantal, good afternoon. Welcome to Home Run and The Edge.
Good afternoon, Dion. Thank you for having me.
It is always a pleasure. You know, Chantal, this act is significant because it applies international standards for protecting this vulnerable group to our Jamaican society. So let us ask you first off, Chantal, who is defined as a person with a disability?
The Act defines a person with a disability as including an individual who has a long-term mental, physical, intellectual, or sensory impairment which may hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with other persons. So, for example, it might be someone who has a mental illness or an individual has lost a limb for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm. Well, in summary, what rights are now afforded to persons with disabilities under the Act?
Well, in summary, I will deal with four main rights which are now enshrined in law. The first one is the ability to register as a person with a disability on the confidential register, which is operated by the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. Through registering, persons with disabilities can access benefits, and this can include monetary benefits, so it would aid them to address any disadvantage that they may have in society. The second right which they now have is the ability to file a complaint in writing to the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities where they face some form of discrimination or another party has failed to comply with the practices or the codes developed by the council. In addition, a person with a disability has a right to employment. So in other words, an employer cannot say they're not going to employ you when you're qualified just because you have a disability. The fourth right, which is important and relevant, is the right to education. So persons with disabilities have the right to education and training, and an educational institution cannot say, I'm not going to enroll you because you are a person who has a disability, for example.
Okay. Earlier you mentioned, Chantal, that the rights in relation to employment, are there any obligations of employers under the Act?
Right. So employers generally should not discriminate against a person that has a disability. And in doing this, it means that there shouldn't be discrimination in terms of employment. So whatever terms are given to another person should be given to the person with a disability. In addition, persons with disabilities should have the same opportunities for promotion, being able to transfer to another post, and to get training. Mm-hmm. In addition, as it relates to dismissing an employer cannot dismiss an employee with a disability just because they have a disability. They would have to have reasonable cause to dismiss the employee. Mm-hmm. In addition, on the other hand, though, the law also does give some leeway to the employers because as it relates to discrimination, where it is found that the act of the employer is justified in the circumstances, then it would not amount to discrimination. So if the terms of employment are different and it can be justified, then it wouldn't be discrimination.
Okay. But that was employers. In addition to the employers, let's look at other categories like landlords. Do landlords or landowners have obligations also under the Act?
Yes, they have obligations, and this is very important. So, for example, if you're a person with a disability renting a premises, a landlord is required to ensure the premises are reasonably accessible to the person with a disability and they're able to use the premises. So, depending on the disability you have, you might have to have a slope so the person can go up the walkway with the wheelchair, for example. And what the law has done is it has distinguished between existing premises and new premises. Existing premises would be a building that existed before the law came into effect on February 14. And new premises would be premises that are now under construction after the law came into effect. So for those new premises, if they're public or commercial premises, for example, say that there's a new building being built in Kingston or Montego Bay, the owner of the premises would have to ensure that the premises are built readily accessible and usable to a person with a disability, or if not, they'd be found to be in breach of the Act.
You're listening to Ms. Chantal Bennett. She's Associate Attorney at DunnCox. We're inside our legal landscape. Chantal, what recourse does a person with a disability have then in the event that a business or the landlords, etc., will breach their obligations?
In the event where there's a breach of for example, the right to employment or the right to ensure the premises is accessible, a person with a disability may file a complaint, and this complaint must be filed within 2 years of the incident occurring, and it be filed in writing to the council. The council would then investigate the matter and determine whether or not it should be referred to the Disabilities Rights Tribunal. And this tribunal can hear the matter, or there can be a determination if the parties have consented to go to mediation or some other form of dispute resolution.
You mentioned Disabilities Rights Tribunal. What are the remedies that the Disabilities Rights Tribunal may order in respect of an aggrieved person or a person with a disability?
So the tribunal has a number of remedies available to it. After assessing the matter and determine whether or not the complaint is justified and reasonable, they may, one, make a declaration outlining the rights of each party, so the rights of the respondent, as well as the person with the disability, or rather the complainant. They may also order compensation to the complainant. Another option is they may order that the person who the complaint has been made against, that they take certain actions within a specific period of time to reduce the effect on the complainant. So, for example, when we're talking earlier about the buildings and the buildings being accessible, in the event that the tribunal hears the matter and finds that the landlord didn't make the building accessible and the person with a disability is adversely affected, then they could order that the landlord make the alterations to the building once it's found that those alterations can be made.
Well, thank you. I'm looking today at the impact of the Disabilities Act. What does it mean for you? You've given us quite a bit of information. Chantal Bennett, Associate Attorney at DunnCox, thank you so very much. Do you have any hashtags, did you know?
Yes, Dion. So one of the important things that people don't realize is every day they make contracts, and in making a contract, you might not consider the Disabilities Act. What the Act says is that if a term of a contract seeks to exclude or limit a provision of the Act, or even try to prevent a person from filing a claim under the Act, then that term of the contract would be deemed void. So landlords, educational institutions, businesses have to be very aware of the types of contracts which they're executing.
Well, thank you very much. That is the legal landscape, and I'm sure we've got quite a bit of information on the impact of the Disabilities Act. I want to thank you so very much. Chantal Bennett is our Associate Attorney at DunnCox in the legal landscape today. We look forward to more next week. Thank you, Chantal.
Thank you for having me, Diana. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Have a good evening yourself too. Well, lots of information there, Patrice. Yes, making you think. So everybody building and all these expansions and new buildings that we see coming up and going on. You know what that means now? You know what that means, Patrice? Gotta make sure you take into consideration all of the legalities before you even start building. Make sure that it's there for everyone. It is The Edge, and you're listening to 105.1, 105.3 FM.